Hello, I'm Mark Schwartz, and we'll start World War II Economics and Production, part number 2, Pre-War America. Slide 2 is our agenda for this particular segment. As it is, we're going to go through a number of issues of why America was unprepared for war while our opponents were already at war for several years. We'll look at the Depression, why factories were closed, workforce was scattered, but there were keys coming that we could exploit in economics and statistics as we began our wartime surge, as we came back to produce more than any other World War II combatant. And there would be policies and people who would make this happen. We would surge, and eventually D-Day would be scheduled based on the projections from economists in our government. Slide 3, here we have the reading sources for this course for all the segments. And you'll be able to refer to your syllabus to get the specific chapters and pages, and also the fact that we have other reading sources available by PDF access on Canvas. Let's look at what was happening before the United States got into the war. The Axis nations, Italy, Germany, Japan, had all been at war. They were, as you see, invading their neighbors. Japan as of 1931 in Manchuria, 1937 in China and such. Italy, the mid-1930s, Ethiopia in the Spanish Civil War, and they continued. And Germany from 1936 on. They were very busy. So our opponents knew when, where, and how all of these expansions of the war were going to happen. And they were prepared, both militarily and to have their economies and industrial production for wartime goods. So then, how do we explain America, our role in the war? The wartime surge, was it just a miracle that happened that no one can explain? We went from the Depression and the conditions there about economic stagnation, loss of confidence, antipathy, isolationism, for about 10 years worth, maybe a little more. And then in wartime, we quickly swung to full employment. We were confident of what we were doing, where we were going. We ended up a world power with abundant wealth. Was it a miracle? Did it just happen? No. We can explain it by the fact that our people managing the economy or production, military growth, we're looking at things like statistical economics to guide production, to use our resources. And as we mass produce things, what we made was very reliable, very maintainable out in the field. And this was something that our opponents could not necessarily do. So it really marked an advantage for America and the Allies. And if you wonder why economics and production are important, look at what we have in this slide as comparisons: aircraft and tank production. In the blue, the three leading Allied producers of weaponry, America, Britain, Russia. And against that, in red, the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. And as you look at the total of aircraft for 1942 to 44, you see 300,000 against just under 115,000. So the Americans, the British, the Russians, we had a lot more aircraft, a ratio of about 2.6 to 1. And in tank production, an even greater ratio, because America and Russia were producing tanks many, many thousands, whereas the Germans, producing most of the Axis, only produced 35,000. So again, the ratio here is definitely slanted to the Allies. And if you're producing good tanks, they don't necessarily have to be the best tanks. Good tanks, and many of them, can win. So Joseph Stalin called this a war of machines, okay, with the idea that if you were fortunate, you could substitute machines for humans, and in so doing, minimize your losses of people on the battlefield and to other war causes. So the conditions for America definitely favored us to be safe from war damage. We had the two oceans to protect us. We had a skilled workforce that was ready to go back to work, trained. We had raw materials and a very good transportation system. Now, this alone was not enough to get us to rise out of the Depression without the war contracts that came in 1939 and 1940 from England and France. And it couldn't prevent isolationism. But with Pearl Harbor and our commitment to war, we put together a manufacturing machine that went out and produced all of these machines to go out and do battle. And we were able to substitute them for human beings and keep our losses to 300,000 killed in combat and another 100,000 in military accidents. But the starting point, the Depression, was very, very hard on the U.S. World War II conditions, pre-World War II, we were not ready to go to war, and the manufacturing sector was in tatters after 10 years of a depressed economy. Employment was at 25%. Some economists said higher, that the statistics didn't always show the total truth. Our factories, many were closed, the workforce scattered. Very little worker training had gone on during the Depression for those 10 years. We were unable to repeat 1929 levels of output of raw materials consumed, output of manufacturing by dollar value or just numbers of production output. But during that time, there were some things going on. Large manufacturers, like the automotive industry, were working on new ideas, how to manage themselves better, how to produce better. And this would come out during the war as a series of advantages we were able to exploit. In other words, before we started into the war, the automotive companies could manufacture parts down to 1/100th of an inch tolerance, machining tolerance. Okay, that meant that parts were truly interchangeable, be it on the factory floor or for tanks or aircraft out in the field. Parts were interchangeable, spare parts or parts taken from one damaged vehicle to be used on another. This 1/100th of an inch is less than a millimeter. We also knew how to use statistics to forecast production, to allocate resources. So productivity and managerial effectiveness were far better than what you saw in any other country, be it Britain, Russia, or the Axis countries. But there were still problems. As you look at the last slide I have here, there were many problems that high-level managers and plant managers had to address. The Hydra here from Greek mythology shows you all of these animal-type, reptile-type heads snapping at you with each problem you have to address simultaneously. I don't have the right materials. We don't have enough plants manufacturing things. The transportation system isn't robust enough right now to carry all the wartime goods. Our allies want Lend-Lease stuff. We don't have facilities for storage. We don't have enough workers ready. The military wants people. Armaments are needed today. So if you're a manager, you look at this and you see all of these issues confronting high-level policy and economists trying to deal with this, but they did sort it out, and the rest of the lecture will explain why and how this happened.